she never screamed. Not once. Even as iron pierced her spine, she only whispered, "I forgive you." The stones of the Tower of London had seen centuries of blood and betrayal, but none remembered Eleanor Hayes. Beneath the fortress walls, far below the echo of boots and bells, her cell sat half swallowed by shadow and centuries of damp. The air was sour with mildew and rats' droppings, and the only light came from a narrow slit in the ceiling where dust hung like suspended breath. Chains clinked when she moved, if she dared to. The cold had found her bones weeks ago. Now it gnawed them. Her back was pressed to slick stone, her wrists raw and crusted over with dried blood. She had not stood fully upright in days, perhaps weeks. The guards did not speak. They passed her food without looking, a crust of moldy bread, a bowl of water lined with green. The cell had no name, no number. No record of her arrest had been inked. That was the point. Eleanor Hayes had been a midwife in Wiltshire. She had brought more than 40 children into the world, comforted the dying, whispered prayers when priests were absent. But mercy, it seemed, could be twisted into heresy, and life into death. It had begun with the noblewoman, Lady Torrance, whose child came too soon one storm-racked night. Eleanor had been called to the manor after the housemaid found the baby limp and blue beside its mother. The father, a cousin to Cromwell himself, had been away at court. When he returned and saw his legacy rotting in a swaddling cloth, his face turned to granite. No servant would be blamed. No wife condemned. But a common midwife. A healer who used herbs instead of psalms. 3 days later, Eleanor was dragged from her home before dawn. They hadn't sent sheriffs or magistrates. That would have required law. Instead, 2 black-cloaked men took her in silence, bearing no seals but the silver cross stitched over their hearts. Their faces were pale and unshaven, their breath sharp with wine and power. Eleanor's neighbors had watched from their windows, hands pressed to panes, eyes wide with the fear that it might be them next. They called themselves the keepers of purity. Their work was not for public eyes. In the bowels of the tower, the rituals began. The first day, she was stripped and forced to kneel on iron grates while prayers were read in Latin. When she spoke, they gagged her. When she stayed silent, they beat her. On the second day, they held her hand over flame until her skin blistered. If she is innocent, they said, God will protect her. On the third, they brought out the branding irons, twisted into the shape of a cross and seared into her back with the smell of cooking flesh. She whispered no curse. No plea. Not even when they tore a lock of her hair to test for signs of the devil. Weeks passed. The markings on her back festered. Her legs weakened. The walls wept with damp, and so did her eyes, in the dark, when no one watched. But she did not confess. For there was nothing to confess. She had done no harm. She had only held a grieving woman's hand and closed a lifeless child's eyes. Yet still they came, the faceless clergy, cloaked in robes that swept the floor like death itself. They read passages from ancient scrolls. They sprinkled salt upon her wounds. One even whispered that her mother had once been seen near the woods on All Hallows' Eve. That was enough. They told her the devil had kissed her spine. That the stillborn child was proof of her evil. That women who bled and healed were of the serpent. That her silence was pride. They said all this while carving crosses into her flesh. She learned to stop speaking altogether. Each word brought pain. Each breath might be taken as defiance. So she prayed without sound, tracing invisible circles on the wall with a broken nail until it tore away. One night, she awoke to silence. Not the usual dead air, but a kind of thick stillness, as if the very stones were holding their breath. Her cell was darker than usual. The slit above had been covered. No footsteps came. No guards. No chance. She waited for hours, or maybe days. And then, the door creaked. The same 2 black-cloaked men entered, their eyes unreadable behind flickering torchlight. One of them held a Bible, its cover torn, its pages frayed and wet. The other brought a basin of water and a cloth. For the first time, they knelt. "We are commanded to cleanse your soul," the older one said. Eleanor did not speak. She only watched as they dipped the cloth and began to scrub her wounds. It was not mercy. They poured vinegar into her cuts, salt into the seams of her back. The screams echoed not from her throat but from theirs, chanted in Latin, twisted into invocations. Her body writhed. Her teeth cracked from clenching. But her eyes remained open, locked on the torchlight, daring it to go out. When the ritual ended, they left her there, soaked and shaking. She lay motionless for 2 days. Or 3. Time was useless now. Then something strange occurred. The rats that had scurried along the walls no longer came. The dripping water stopped. The dampness turned dry. The stones beneath her body no longer felt cold. The silence had weight now. And within it, a presence. They came to check on her the 6th week. The door groaned open, rusty and uncertain. The torchbearer stepped first, expecting to find a corpse. Instead, there was nothing. The shackles still hung. The chain was still bolted. But the woman was gone. Her rags remained in a heap on the stone. Her blood had dried in strange, curling shapes along the floor, as if dragged into a spiral. And in the center of the cell, laid reverently on the slab, was the Bible. Its cover bore a single mark, not carved, not inked, but gouged by what looked like claws. 4 slashes, deep and deliberate. Inside, one verse had been underlined in her blood. Asterisk, the truth shall set you free. Asterisk. They searched the cell. They questioned the guards. But no one had seen her pass. No rope, no ladder, no sign of tampering. Only silence. Only the memory of a woman who never screamed. And in time, not even that remained. The records were burned during the war. The clergy died, their names lost. But some say, in certain cold corners of the tower, you can still hear iron clink on stone. And when the wind moans low, someone whispering, I forgive you. Before the rats came for London's bones, they came for its women. The summer of 1665 was not marked by sunshine, but by smoke and rot. Plague carts rattled through cobbled streets, their wheels soaked in blood and lime. Doors were marked with red crosses, and behind them lay bodies, some already cold, others still groaning. The air was thick with ash, fear, and a scent no scripture could cleanse. People turned their faces away from strangers. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Eyes grew suspicious. And when suspicion failed, hatred took its place. Sarah Dunst was 19 when they took her. She had lived on Milk Street with her mother, a seamstress like herself. Together, they stitched buttons for gentry and patched cloaks for lesser men. Her mother's cough came in June, dry at first, then wet, then red. By the time the watchers came, she was already stiff, her hands still grasping thread. Neighbors didn't wait for the priest. They whispered. Said the girl had cursed her own mother. That her home had no rats, no rot, surely the devil had granted her protection in exchange for plague. They watched her hang laundry with clean fingers. Watched her speak to no one, eat alone, pray alone. It didn't matter that grief had silenced her. Silence was as damning as sin. She was arrested by 2 parish constables under orders that bore no seal, just a red wax mark that bled. They told her she'd be kept safe until her innocence could be confirmed. But the prison door groaned like a coffin, and the moment she crossed the threshold of Bridewell, Sarah knew Northwest One left that place innocent. Bridewell Prison was a crumbling skeleton near the Fleet River, once a royal palace, now a cage. Inside, it stank of urine, mildew, and old terror. There were no true cells, only iron-barred chambers where women slept shoulder to shoulder on straw soiled with weeks of filth. The jailers said there were 200 of them, but no one counted anymore. Some came in mad. Some left in sacks. Most had been arrested for poverty. A widow who begged too loudly. A girl caught taking bread. Others were accused of more abstract sins, temptation, defiance, or a look held too long. They were women first, witches second. Sarah was given no trial, only a mark, a yellow ribbon tied to her wrist. She was placed near the corner furthest from the windows, beside a woman with missing teeth and a stitched-up eye. That woman never spoke, only watched, clutching a rag doll with one arm and scratching her leg raw with the other. Days bled into each other. Twice a week, the guards came to cleanse them. They called it the ritual. Women were stripped bare and led down stone steps slick with slime into a cold chamber lined with rusted hooks. There, they were strapped to whipping posts, arms stretched, legs trembling. Buckets of vinegar and salt water were poured over their backs. Then came the lashes. Not just from whips, but from rope-bound reeds soaked in lime. Afterward, they were told to thank the Lord for purification. Sarah lasted 4 rituals before her skin began to peel. The guards never made eye contact. They chanted hymns as they punished, as if pain were prayer. One jailer, a beardless man no older than 20, always watched her closely. He asked, on the 3rd night, whether her mother had confessed to sin before dying. She said nothing. He struck her. In the darkness of her corner, Sarah found scraps, charcoal from burnt wood, paper peeled from the prison's crumbling walls. She began to write. Not poetry. Not pleas. Just facts. Observations. Names. Dates. She traced her thoughts onto paper no one would read. One night, she wrote. They bleed us to cure the curse, but the only curse is man's fear of us. The pages grew into a hidden ledger, folded beneath her thin mattress of straw and grief. The women around her died slowly. One girl, no more than 15, claimed in delirium that a man had visited her dreams and kissed her with fire. A nun accused her of demon courting. The guards buried her alive outside the walls. Another woman tried to swallow a rat to end her hunger. She choked. Another was caught drawing stars on the wall with her blood. Her fingers were snapped one by one, then dipped in boiling fat. Sarah tried not to feel any more. But the journal reminded her that pain was proof of memory. One night, as thunder broke over London, the prison caught fire. Some said it was lightning. Others whispered that the flames began in the punishment chamber, where too many wounds had been washed with oil. Screams echoed through stone. Chains melted. Straw burned fast. Sarah awoke to smoke thick as fog, choking her throat. The bars glowed orange. The wooden beams above cracked. She clutched her bundle of pages and pressed them beneath a loose stone by the wall. She did not run. There was nowhere to run to. In the weeks that followed, London's papers made no mention of Bridewell. The city was too full of dead to count the forgotten. But years later, in the ruins, a mason found a bundle of charred pages pressed beneath stone. Most were ash. But one sentence remained, written in a trembling hand, the ink blurred but legible. They bleed us to cure the curse, but the only curse is man's fear of us. Nothing else was recovered. No names. No numbers. No graves. Bridewell burned. And no one remembered who had lived or died within its stone.